Good afternoon. This is Dave Hedrick. I'm here in beautiful Milton, Indiana with Roger Smith, and I'm going to take an opportunity, and Roger's given me this opportunity to spend some time to interview him a little bit about his musical history, but much more about who Roger Smith is, and what we'll do is this will probably be broken up into about a 4 or 5 video clip series, and we'll start, and I'll be asking some questions, and we'll get Roger started, and then see where we go from there. Roger, birthplace, date of birth?
Amelia, Virginia.
And where's Amelia located?
Oh, it's about 50 miles outside of Richmond, Virginia.
Okay.
And I was not raised there. I was raised in North Carolina. The reason that I was born in Amelia, Virginia, they almost caught my dad making moonshine, and he outran them, and my mother, her dad operated the ice plant in Amelia, Virginia.
Okay. Yes.
So he went to Amelia, Virginia, and my mother followed him with, well, I was the 4th son, so there was 3 other sons that was with her that moved to Amelia, Virginia.
Okay. So how many brothers and sisters altogether?
Well, there was 5 brothers, or 4 brothers, and 1 sister.
Okay, now you were the 3rd oldest or 4th oldest?
I was the 4th oldest.
Okay. So you had what? Was the sister younger than yourself?
I had a sister that had a twin
Okay.
brother that's younger than I am,
Right.
by 2 years.
Okay.
And he died at about 6 months old.
Oh, okay.
So,
And your birth date was 1925, 26?
26.
1926. What was the date?
Well, now, Uncle Sam says 26,
Okay.
but my mother says 11. 7/11/26.
All right.
That's kind of comical, you know, when your mother says, no, you were not born on the 26th, you were born on the 11th.
Right.
Back in 1926, I'd say that the doctor that delivered me, he rode around maybe for a week or so with the paperwork, or maybe
Before he filed the
even
paperwork?
made
Right.
it up.
Right.
So it's turned in the 26th, so that's the reason they have it.
Now,
that
did you
way.
know your grandparents as you were growing up?
Yes, except my grandmother on my mother's side.
Had she passed early?
Yeah. I had 2 grandfathers and 1 grandmother
Okay.
that I knew.
And what did they do? Did they farm? Did they, work the land, or did they have a more, at least for my today's definition, a more conventional
Well, my
type job?
grandfather on my mother's side operated the ice plant
Okay.
in Amelia, and my grandfather in North Carolina, he farmed.
Right.
And
Now, your father, in addition to his moonlighting in the moonshine business, what else
well,
did he do?
He was a sawmiller, and well, that's all he did for.
Right.
He owned 2 sawmills and about 6 trucks. My mother and father, they separated when I was, I don't know, maybe 9 years old.
Okay.
he made too much money and just couldn't stand it to stay home. He had to get out and spend it.
Okay. Bit of a wanderlust.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
So as you were growing up, then she became the major influence in your life, would you say?
Yes, because he died in 36, I believe it was.
Okay, so you'd have only been 9 or 10 years old
Well,
at the
I was
time.
10 or 11.
Okay.
I'd been 11, it'd have been 37.
Okay. Did she ever remarry, or did she just go it alone?
No, she never did remarry.
Right. Now, the musical influences that she brought, or the other musical influences as you were growing up, you know, at an early age in that 7, 8, 9, 10, when were you first starting to be influenced musically by what?
I can remember, as far back as I can remember, trying to learn to play the guitar.
Did she play?
She played guitar.
Okay.
Yeah.
Had she learned from her mother or father, or what was the influence that led her to learn to play the
Now,
guitar?
you asking me something that I cannot answer. I know that one time I did know, but
Okay. At what age did you
she-
start to pick up on playing the guitar?
She could play pretty good guitar.
Okay.
She had one tune that I will always remember, Spanish Fang Down,
Okay.
and she picked it good too.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Were you inclined to be interested in the guitar and music at a pretty early age?
yes. What the way that I came up after learning to play some guitar, I had a brother that ordered a mandolin from Sears and Roebuck,
Mhm.
and it was a dandy. I bet it cost 15. Mine might have cost as much as $20.
Quite a bit of money back then.
Oh Lord. Anyways, I learned to plunk on it, and
Were you playing by ear, just based on picking out notes?
yes, I didn't have nobody to
Right.
show me anything.
Were you hearing anything from a radio or from
Well,
a
I was hearing things from records like
78s?
yeah,
Right.
mostly Bill Monroe and the Bluegrass Boys.
So Bill's music had, even at an early age, had creeped into your life.
Yeah, but at that time it was Charlie and Bill. They were
Yeah, the Monroe
They-
brothers.
yeah, because Bill didn't hit the opera till 39.
Yes.
The reason I know that, I got it on my belt buckle.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and the great part is, as we explore a little further into the interview, we'll start to talk about, you know, how you come to meet Bill Monroe and how you came to come to Indiana, and Bill Monroe's influence,
Right.
you know, on you as both a musician and also as a person.
Yes.
Now, with brothers and sisters, or the sister and the brothers, did they have an inclination to want to play
I had a
music?
brother that was 4 years older than I am that played good guitar. And he, when I was 12, he brought a fiddle in and laid on the bed. And I don't know why, but man, that fiddle sure did fascinate me.
Did it really?
And I started working on that. He didn't have no case, just a fiddle and a bow. But I very well remember we lived on a 126-acre farm, and we'd come out of the field after working corn or whatever we were doing, and when I hit the house, that fiddle was the first thing that I picked up, and I'd be sawing on it, you know, and my brother, they'd come by and say, "Seesaw, seesaw, put that thing down."
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Yes.
and that's encouraging, you know.
Oh, absolutely. Especially when you're younger than they are.
That's right.
They're really encouraging older brothers.
But they couldn't say anything that would discourage me on playing that fiddle.
Now, as you were starting to pick up on playing the fiddle, were there influences from either radio or the phonograph
Phonograph.
that gave you a starting point to start to
Yeah.
try to duplicate certain tones?
Yes, and I'd pick up a little off of the radio. If a band happened, but there wasn't very much music on the radio.
Right,
There wasn't very many bands around picking period.
right,
This was back in the 30s.
right.
So,
On weekends, would you go with your mother to any social gatherings?
no.
So there was no musical influence filtering in from
No,
people that
we-
were local to the area?
We would watch the Grand Ole Opry on Saturday night
Okay,
if we could get it.
yes.
You know how it fade in and out.
Right. Yeah.
But-
WSM putting out 50,000 watts still wasn't reaching as far east up into that area consistently.
Well, it would and it wouldn't.
Okay.
I mean, it'd come and go, you know.
Yes. Who were some of the people that you can remember on the Grand Ole Opry before the Bill Monroe influence of 1938, 39? Because Monroe became a full-time member, I think, in 1938 or 39. Right.
Yeah, well, Roy Acuff was one, you know.
Yes.
And I don't remember anybody besides Roy that really sticks out
Right.
in my memory as to, because you had the Skillet Liquors and some
Gid
that-
Tanner and the Skillet Liquor.
Yeah.
Any Mainers Mountaineers back in that time
Well,
frame?
Maybe, but they wasn't all that great either.
Right. Yeah, it was real rough, true
Right.
mountain music, okay?
Right.
It wasn't at all refined to what Monroe ultimately evolved to.
Right. I remember learning to play the fiddle and holding the fiddle here in my,
Crotch of the arm.
yeah,
Right.
and that didn't work out
Mm-hmm.
because you can't go up the neck on it.
Yeah, you're locked up at that point.
So I got hung there for a while.
So other musicians within the area wasn't something, at least at an early age, let's say from 10 until you were 15 or 16, that you were getting much exposure to?
Well, we were playing dances. That was the main thing.
At what age did you start to play some square dances and?
Real young, and I don't remember the age.
Okay.
But
Right.
I was probably 13 to 14.
Now, who else would you play with when you went out to play those?
My brother
particular-
and a guy by the name of Krause.
Okay.
Buster Krause was his name.
Okay.
He played the clawhammer banjo.
Okay. So from
Strictly.
so from a banjo influence standpoint, there was any three-finger style
No.
banjo at all in
No.
that area that
No.
you were exposed to?
All clawhammer.
All pure clawhammer.
He didn't even have a banjo that had frets.
Oh, so it was a fretless, yeah.
Well, yeah, he
Mhm.
had it. It had something on the fingerboard about 5 to 6 frets up.
Right.
What won't rust? What's the name of the metal that won't rust?
Stainless steel.
No. No,
Okay.
it wasn't steel.
Boy, I'm sorry, I can't.
What's the keys made out of?
The
Brass.
okay, brass. Sure.
He had a piece of brass that was tacked on to the.
Okay.
And can you imagine playing a banjo that way?
If it was the only banjo that you probably had access to, I guess so. Now, in the world of banjo, as you were playing a lot of fiddle at 13, 14, and 15, when did banjo and let's call it the Scruggs style, but with you being the age that you are, a lot of times there were a lot of other influences going on in Earl's life that potentially were going to influence you also. At what age did you start to become influenced on the banjo?
Well, for a living, we sawmilled and farmed. And I found out that I had tuberculosis.
Yes, I wanted to touch on that,
And
on some of the health issues.
Well, I have to get to that in order to get to,
You bet.
because that's what put me in music.
Okay.
In other words, I went to the Black Mountain, to the sanatorium near Asheville, North Carolina.
And what age?
At about 20 or 21.
Okay, so TB came into your life.
Right. I was already married at this time.
Okay.
So I spent a year there the first time and came out okay.
1945, 1946, tail end of
Well,
the
I
World
went
War.
in there in 49, came out in 50.
Okay, so you'd have been 24, 25.
Well, yeah, I think I was 22 when I went
Okay,
up there.
all right. So the time that you spent in treatment for tuberculosis that you had contracted at that point, now how did that lead and influence your musical life?
Well, I went right back to the mill when I thought I was able to the sawmill.
Sawmill.
And I found out that I was going to have to go back to the hospital for the same thing. And I spent 14 months that time.
How did it make you feel? I mean, what were some of the symptoms and how did you physically feel that led them to that diagnosis?
Well, 132 pounds of weight.
Oh dear.
Yeah, that
Couldn't put weight on, or did it?
well,
did
it
you
just,
start to lose weight?
It takes you down.
Right.
And
Breathing problems?
well, I didn't know that I had a breathing problem, but I'm sure that I did.
Okay.
But I just knew that I couldn't go back and do hard physical work.
Yes.
So I turned to music.
Okay.
And there was a band playing at WPAQ in Mount Airy. And they lost their fiddle player.
Mm-hmm.
So I took the fiddle and marched myself down to PAQ and said, "Here I am, boys."
Yeah. 1947, 48, somewhere in that time frame?
No, that'd have been in 50, probably 51.
Okay.
And
You decided that I'm going to make a living playing music.
I'm gonna, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
cool.
gonna make a fortune playing music.
Yeah. Just the beginning of a fortune playing
Yeah,
music.
and I worked on that first million for years and never did get it, so
Well,
I gave up on it and went for the second.
there you go.
But they were dumber than what I was, so they hired me to play fiddle. And the more fiddle I played, the better I became, and I finally was among their equal, you know.
Right.
And we had a good band. Larry Richardson was the guy that I
Sure.
working with. And
Right.
Happy Smith.
Mm-hmm.
Happy was a clawhammer. He could pick a little three-pick, but
Right.
not much.
So you were playing fiddle and Larry was playing banjo,
and-
three-finger style.
Yeah, and Happy was playing banjo, and then a guy by the name of Lowe was playing guitar, and Dawson was a mandolin picker, and who else? Joe Johnson was.
Okay.
He was an MC at PAQ. He was a bass man too.
Okay.
He was the bass player, so he did all the advertising for the shows.
Did the promotion.
that Larry had. Yeah,
Right.
right.
Now, the music then that was being played was influenced by what they heard from Monroe or the Stanley
Larry had
Brothers?
already played with Bill.
Right.
And but I got an awful lot off of recordings that Bill put out, you know.
Right.
We had this guy by the name of Krause there that lived not too far from where I did, that he bought these albums as they were coming out.
So the kind of shows that you would put on would last half hour, 45 minutes, 1 hour. Did you have a structure of a show
Yeah.
in terms of who
Right.
the MC was?
We put on shows then just like they do today.
Okay. And not only radio shows, but then paid admission style shows in which
we
you would
played
become
a
the
lot of
feature.
drive-in theaters.
Is that right?
Right.
Right. I know I've heard about, the history of Flatt and Scruggs and others, even Monroe, playing drive-in theaters before the feature films would come on, or if they were in fact completely the featured act. How did you react to playing at the drive-in theaters? What was enjoyable about it, or what was challenging about it?
Well, I can play just as good up on top of a building as I can down on the ground.
How many people might you play in front of in that kind of
Well,
setting?
Some of them had big theaters, and some didn't have.
Right.
It just depended on the amount of cars that they could get in to the theater.
Right.
But we did that, and then we played. They were having some festivals then too, or the parks were.
Okay.
We played one I remember in York, Pennsylvania, which was
That's quite a distance to travel.
right. Yeah, it was. But we had a good band.
How long did that band hold together, and how did you evolve or move away from that? And what were the influences that led that particular band and you to move into other areas?
I stayed with Larry about a year and a half, I'd say, and Jim Eames offered me a job, and I moved from Larry to Jim Eames. And Jim operated in Martinsville, Virginia.
Okay.
And we were playing we were putting on our show, in Danville, Virginia, at this, I forget the name of the place, but it was a pretty good sized building, and this first hour was broadcasted, the show was. And after we played the dance, and we were putting up our instruments, why Carlton Haney came in and introduced himself to me.
Was Carlton just out there just to watch the show?
Yeah.
And he then comes up and introduces himself to you.
And what he said to me was that he said Jackie Phelps is leaving Bill's band. He's a guitar picker. Said Bill needs a guitar player. Said, would you be interested in the job? And I said, yes, I'd be interested in the job. But I told him that I hadn't been out of the hospital all that long, and that I didn't think that it would be the time to leave Jim, because it just started for him. So he left his card and said, when you leave Jim, why, give me a call and we'll see what we can do. And
Now, at the time, Jim Eames was doing primarily country music
and
some bluegrass,
Yeah.
but it was, I believe, it was kind of a mixed
yeah,
show.
right. But Jim had played guitar for Bill.
Yes, right.
So I left Jim, but I didn't call Carlton. I met Larry, and he had called Larry.
Richardson.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he left a telephone number at Hammond's in Nashville, Indiana,
Right.
for 9 o'clock on a Wednesday night.
Okay.
And Larry's telling me about it, and he said, I'm not going. He said, if you're interested in going up there and playing as part of the staff band, here's your chance. So I decided to give it a shot.
So that was your first opportunity to go west up
Right.
into Indiana
Right.
and to go and play as part of the staff band at Bean Blossom.
Right.
And that year would have been
That'd have been
54?
in 54, because when I called him,
okay.
because I came up in 55,
Yes.
and
So Monroe had owned Bean Blossom only for a couple of years
yeah,
because he bought it in 52.
Right.
Because I remember Tom Adler has chronicled that in his book, and I was born in 52. And so a couple of years after Monroe had acquired Bean Blossom, you were suddenly on your way to Bean Blossom, Indiana to play as part of the staff band. And Carlton was managing Monroe at the time.
Carlton and Birch.
Okay. Boy, that's a unique combination.
Oh, you better believe that. But anyways, I called Carlton and I said, "What's it pay?" And he said, "Well, it pays $50 a week, and if you do any shows throughout the week, that'll be on percentage." And at that time, $50 was a pretty good little amount of
Yeah,
pay.
absolutely.
So I told him I'd give it a shot.
Now, how many of you came up there to play?
Just me.
Just yourself.
Right.
So you were grouped with some other players.
Well, at that time I wasn't. I had left, when I left gym, I wasn't doing
right.
anything.
You were on your own.
Yeah. So I didn't come up then. He wanted me up there whenever I forget now, in 55 what month they started.
Okay.
But I'm thinking it's either April, May. When do they start that down there?
I think back then, Bill would typically kick off Bean Blossom on Easter Sunday, which typically was April.
April?
Yeah,
Okay.
it was typically April.
Well, anyways, I left Carolina and came on up when he was talking about.
Right. Had you heard anything about Bean Blossom before coming up?
Just from Larry, because Larry played as part of the staff band.
Right.
He and Bobby Osborne.
Yes. And that would have been 52, 53, right after Monroe had acquired it.
Right.
And Bill had enough income, evidently, to be able to afford to invest in a house band, because from what I can remember and what I've heard is that the crowds back in 52, 53, 54, when Bill had acquired the property, were strong enough to create enough income to make that commitment to have people come and play.
Right.
What was your first impressions of seeing the barn at Bean Blossom and some of the accommodations that existed with out at the lake with the original cabins that were setting along the edge of the lake? Now he's going to laugh because he and I both know this story.
Well, the old barn was, it wasn't all that bad as far as a place to put on a show. But, you know, it was pretty well dilapidated. I don't know how to.
It was never built well to start with.
That's right.
All right.
And hot.
Yes.
That roof, it just melted and come right down in. And
Yeah, black tar paper.
That's right.
Setting up on a black asphalt roof.
But they'd fill that place up.
Now, who were some of the acts that you would be accompanying or would come in as some of the booked acts when you first got to the world of Bean Blossom?
Well, if they sent anybody up there, Bill a lot of times would book in like single acts, you know.
Yes.
And we all would help out there
Right.
because we had electric lead
Mm-hmm.
in the band. We also had steel, and we had a banjo. We
Okay.
had a fiddle.
Now, who might have been playing banjo at that time? Yeah, as you were, so you would do both fiddle and banjo.
Right.
So by that point, you had evolved your banjo picking by being influenced by others, that you were doing both banjo and fiddle work
Right.
in
Right.
54 and 55.
Right.
Now, as you guys were living and staying up there
At that hotel.
at the beautiful Hotel Bean Blossom out on the lake, out on the pond.
Just at the edge.
Yeah, just at the edge.
Well, it's a good place to take a shower.
And
That lake was big enough.
yeah, it was big enough that you could get wet.
That's right.
Absolutely. Now, what were some of the accommodations that you went through while you were, staying there? Would you go out and play during the week? Is that ultimately led to
We went
meeting?
down to Kentucky and played a couple of dates
Okay.
down there. Where did we go down there? Yeah, the name kind of leaves me now. But it's down there around where the Osborne brothers were raised.
Okay. Around what, Hayden
Yeah.
area? Now, was that music primarily driven by country flavor and country style, or were you blending
Well, we
some
put
bluegrass?
on country and some bluegrass too.
Okay. So the singing would be influenced by Bill Monroe, but also potentially other country acts that were being heard or listened
You talking
to?
about at Bean Blossom?
Yes.
Yes, there was all types of bands that came from the Opry or Renfro Valley that put on shows
Right.
there at Bean Blossom.
Any
But-
names or groups that come to mind that maybe impressed you by, their ability to play and sing in that time frame?
Yeah.
Any come to mind?
Well, it's just the bands from the Opry,
Right.
you know, like Johnny and Jack.
Sure.
And
Was Kitty Wells
yeah,
traveling with
right,
Johnny and Jack, obviously, at the time?
right. And then too, you had Loretta Lynn.
Mm-hmm.
She pulled her shoes off and flat-footed danced
Right.
there.
Yeah. Her and Mooney would travel in a station wagon, just the two of them.
Well, they were up there in a '53 Ford car.
There you go. Right.
But I played fiddle for her to square dance or dance flatfoot, just the old flatfoot dancing.
Mm-hmm. And that stage
And that
before
gal
it had
can dance.
yeah, and that stage before it had any carpeting on it, it could be
It's
a
wood.
challenge. Yeah, it could be a challenge
out
dancing
for the
on
splinters.
the splinters. Now, when did you first spend time playing with Bill Monroe on a little more regular basis?
Well, you know, when Bill was booked in up there, he would listen to what the band did, the house band.
Yes.
I was part of the house band. He heard my banjo picking and my fiddle playing, and he knew that I could play his style of music because
Right.
I grew up on it.
Yes. Does a year come to mind? 55, 56?
56 is
56 is when you
I
started.
first played with him. That's when he called me.
Okay.
I was playing at that time over in Anderson in a place called the Clubhouse.
Mm-hmm. Now, is that about the time that Glenn Osby Smith.
Well,
and
when
you,
I played the year of '55, Glenn and Rocky Rose came to me and asked me what I was going to do when they closed Bean Blossom in the winter. And I said, haven't the slightest idea. Said, well, would you want to play with us? And they offered me $10 more on the week to play with them
right.
than I was getting at Bean Blossom. And I said, well, sure, I'll play with you. So I rented a room at the Plaza Hotel in Newcastle and started playing with them after they closed.
Yeah, because you weren't going to live out there at Bean Blossom
That's right.
with the lack of heat that was going on in those cabins.
That's right. That hotel would have got cold.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I knew that I had to leave there,
Right.
but for some reason, it never did bother me that if I don't have a job, I never did have any problem getting one.
Okay.
Maybe that's the reason that it didn't bother me.
There you go. Well, I mean, you go where the opportunity presented itself.
But I was playing some pretty decent music then.
Mm-hmm.
And
So in the 1958 time frame, it would be spend a little bit of time if the opportunity presented itself with Bill, but then working the winter circuit in and around Anderson, Newcastle, I assume Richmond, back to Indianapolis, and whatever work was available, as you may even have gone into, Central Ohio.
Yeah.
You told me the story about learning to play what I call the double roll beginning of Foggy Mountain Breakdown. And if you would share with me and in this interview how you come to ask a certain banjo player how he approached that particular classic Earl Scruggs lick.
well, I was playing with Osby at the clubhouse with Rocky Rose and Osby Smith.
Mm-hmm.
And Oz said to me, asked me if I'd like to go on a Sunday over to Dayton. That's where Sonny and Bob lived, and they were playing a club over there
Right.
7 nights a week. We didn't play on Sunday in Indiana.
Right.
And I said, yeah, I'll ride with you over there. So we went over to Sonny's dad's, and they were rehearsing on some songs that they were going to go to Nashville and cut.
And who was playing guitar with him at the time? Do you remember? Was it in the Red Allen period, or was it earlier?
No,
Before
it was,
Red.
I think it was. Was Dale Slade?
Dale Sled, sure. Yeah,
I
Dale was
think-
with him a couple of different times along
I
with
think
me.
he was the guitar
Okay.
player.
All right.
But and the fiddle player was Art Stamper.
Art Stamper.
We Osby and I went with them to the club, and we played a little there. I relieved Sonny with banjo,
Yes.
and Oz he did some singing and picked a little melon. And there is where that I found out how to get the 8-note roll.
Yeah, the thumb and
Yeah,
the finger
right.
sequence in on the second string.
Right. Now I was getting that 1, 2, 3, 4,
Mm-hmm.
but I went from that to 1, 2, 3, 4.
Right. Could you hear the difference when you heard Sonny playing it?
Yeah, because it's smoother.
Right.
Yeah.
And I assume Sonny either had been around Earl or had been influenced by somebody else who had probably seen Earl physically do it that way,
Right.
or somebody physically do it that way.
Right. I didn't ask him, but I just asked him how he got how he started Foggy Mountain Breakdown.
Right. And he'd have probably been, what, 15 or 16 at the time? Not much older than that.
I'm not sure just how old he was. He was 14 when he started working with Bill.
Okay. So 5, 6, he'd been 19 or 20 probably at the time.
I'd say.
Right. But they were playing 7 nights a week, huh?
Yeah. So that's where I learned.
Right.
You know.
And you learn from all different people and
Right.
all different influences.
Well, there wasn't too many people around
Yes.
picking in the 50s.
Right.
It was kind of hard to find musicians then.
Yeah. So as you were, working the winters and then coming back to the summers, how did Rose Logston come into your life, and how did you come to meet her as that segment of your life in a relationship and a marriage that you had with Rose?
Well, I met her there at Bean Blossom and started dating her.
Yeah, because her father, Jerry, would be there, and then
Yeah, they would.
Rose and her sister would get up and
They'd
sing on
sing.
stage.
Right.
Right. About what year did you first meet her?
I assume in 55.
Okay. Right. Because, it's kind of a side note, when I was, through my father, was first introduced to you, and I was only 10 years old in 1962, you had and were married and had a stepdaughter, Cleta, who was my brother and my age. And we were, first introduced,
Right.
through Jerry Logston and
Right.
And with Rose and her sister playing there at Bean Blossom.
Yeah.
So as you then started to evolve, when did you come to Columbus to live, and how did you start to make the transition and from playing music full time to starting to move into truck driving? I think it's your telephone ringing.
I know it is.
Hey, what we're going to do, we're going to take a break here, and he's going to get something to drink and maybe answer the telephone. We'll be right back.